Again, my name is Gwen Sorley, and today we'll be discussing assessing executive function and attention. Assessments are tools that provide insight and direction. Now, many of you here today may be thinking to yourself, well, is an assessment really necessary? Should I do an assessment? Should I have my child do an assessment? Should I have assessments available for my clients? Because I already know where the difficulties lie. And I would like your feedback now, because I think many of you are here today because you are concerned about some different areas. Maybe you're a parent and you're concerned because it takes so long for your child to finish his homework every night. Or maybe you're an adult and you're having a hard time balancing relationships and the workplace because of a difficult time with time management or emotion regulation. Or maybe you're a professional and you have a variety of clients who are struggling with attention and follow through and organization and task completion. Go ahead and in the chat box, if you would, share some of the areas of concern that you have today. And I can share some of those answers so that we can all get a better understanding of who's here today and what your concerns are. So as you're typing in those areas of concern, again, you may be wondering, well, I'm typing in what I'm concerned about, so isn't that enough? Do I really need an assessment to tell me or to confirm that my child has difficulties with emotion regulation? I see it on a day-to-day basis. So what will an assessment do for me? And as you know, ADHD, weak executive function, it's a journey. And you're probably constantly in that state where you're trying to determine which path do you take? What should you do in order to improve? For example, let's see what Maria said. She said, due to time management issues, attention, etc., I am leaving my company at the end of the year to find something that will work up my strengths instead of getting my weaknesses and getting bad reviews at work. So already Maria knows that time management and attention are issues that are causing her to look for a new career path. And so when we do an assessment, she can better determine which path to take. You know, in order to improve her time management and her attention, does she stay the course? Does she go straight on, keep doing what she's doing and hope for the best? Maybe she takes the path to the left, which incorporates some accommodations. Or maybe she takes the path to the right that incorporates some accommodations and also skill building, cognitive skill building. So assessments allow us to select the appropriate path and to really make certain that we reach our final destination. Assessments are tools that can help us, again, determine the correct path. Deborah says she's concerned about the emotion regulation and of the formerly incarcerated adults she works with. So that's a really special population. And if we can get more information about their strengths and their weaknesses, then we can formulate a correct path for them. And so it helps us when we do an assessment, define the problem areas. Also, it determines your strengths and your weaknesses. Like Maria brought up earlier, she's going to look at a job or a career path that plays more to her strengths. So an assessment will allow her to better formulate that plan, better know what her strengths are and what her weaknesses are. It also indicates the severity of those weaknesses. And when we look at that, that's really important because I talk to many parents, and oftentimes I'll hear, well, I know he has a hard time completing his assignments, or I know she has a really difficult time controlling her impulsive nature, but I'm not certain if that's ADHD or weak executive function, or is it just being 7? Is it just being 7 years old? Is that the way all 7-year-olds are? And so when we do an assessment, especially an assessment that's norm referenced, we can actually look at the severity of the weakness. Is it just being 7, or is it something that we should be concerned about and make a plan of action? It also allows us, as we've been talking about, to develop that plan of action. And that is so critical, because I'll talk to many individuals who will say, well, we went through a neuropsych evaluation. We have a 20-page report, but that's all we have. We have a 20-page report indicating where all the challenges lie. But now what? Now what do we do? So it's not enough just to have the assessment. We have to take that information and do something with that. Have a clear path so that we can take that journey and reach our final destination. Eve says, how to plan, find it difficult, right? And so that's something we can do together. It also provides a baseline to document progress. And that's really important, because along the way, along our journey, we have to assess and make certain that the plan is effective, that we're reaching certain goals. So let's say, for example, you're doing a play attention plan, which is typically about 40 hours total. So we would do a pre-assessment to get that baseline and see where all the problem areas are, define the severity, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and formulate the plan. Then about 20 hours in, about that halfway point, we're going to do the assessments again so that we can really determine, is the plan going well? Have we reached certain benchmarks we expected to reach? Have we exceeded our expectations? Are there some things in the plan that are not working? Do we need to make adjustments? Do we need to focus on some other areas? So it allows us that ability to make adjustments. And then also, we would do another assessment when we reach that end point, around 40 hours of training. And that will allow us to accurately determine if it's an appropriate time to graduate from the plan or from the program. So when we have that baseline, we can clearly see the starting point and then assess along the way improvement and then a graduation time. You also probably see this with your child's IEPs. If you have an IEP in school, you might have a year-long plan with very specific benchmarks, and you're going to meet along the way in order to evaluate if that plan is working. And you'll use assessments and specific benchmarks to determine how that plan is going. So there are a lot of positive things that can come out of doing an assessment. When we talk about assessing ADHD or weak executive function, as you all know, because you've written a lot of different notes here in the chat box, attention is just one piece of the puzzle. Many of you also mentioned emotion regulation, organization, time management, being able to plan, being able to filter distractions. So you know that attention's just one piece. We have to look at the entire puzzle, all of the pieces, in order to accurately assess those strengths and weaknesses. So we offer 2 different assessments, the focus assessment and the brief assessment. And I'm going to explain each of those assessments, what each one assesses, evaluates, and what we can do with that information moving forward. The brief assessment, the brief is an acronym for behavior rating intake of executive function. So this assessment is an online survey. It asks you a series of questions. It's appropriate from any age from about 5 years old all the way up through adulthood. And the assessment will probably take around 20 minutes. Of course, it's different for everyone, but about 20 minutes in length. You can do the online survey at home or in your office, and it is designed to evaluate executive function from multiple perspectives. So let's say you have a school-age child and you as the parent would like to fill out the brief assessment, but you also want the teachers to fill out the brief assessment. And that allows us an opportunity to get a snapshot of your child's executive function on a day-to-day basis. But not only the executive function on a day-to-day basis, we can also look at the executive function at home and at school. Is it pretty much the same, or are we seeing some differences? If you are 13 years old or older, so if you're an adult, you'll do a self-assessment. And I think the self-assessment is really critical because sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day, we don't take that time to sit back and reflect on how our difficulties with executive function are actually affecting us on a day-to-day basis. So this gives you that 20-minute block of time where you can actually sit back and reflect, answer a variety of questions, and at the end, receive a full report that will give you a really clear snapshot of your executive function. Now, I find it interesting also when teenagers do the self-assessment. I was chatting with a mom the other day and we were reviewing the brief assessment results. She had filled out a brief assessment for her 15-year-old son, her observations, and then he did a self-assessment. So 15-year-old boy, and he did the self-assessment. And what the result was really interesting because as we were going through the results, I said to the mom, did you know that his perception of executive function and your perception are almost identical? That their reporting was almost identical on all of the different areas. And she thought that was so interesting because she didn't even realize that he knew this was an issue, right? If you have a teenager, oftentimes you'll ask them how things are going and everything's fine, right? No problems. But this gave them an opportunity to actually start communicating because they never really talked about executive function or how he was feeling or what he was struggling with. And this actually opened that door to communication where she could really understand where he was coming from and he could express his difficulties a little bit better. Annie says, can the assessments be completed by the parent, teacher, and self-assessment from a 13-year-old? Absolutely. You can do all three of those. Good question, Annie. So this assessment will allow us to pinpoint where and why you struggle. Then when we look at all of the different areas, this is exactly what the brief assessment will evaluate. And let's just touch on them. I know a lot of you are familiar with executive function, but let's go through this and really chat about each area. So inhibit, that is going to assess your inhibitory control, your ability to control your impulsivity. Self-monitoring, so that is your ability to really understand how your behaviors or your actions affect you and others. Shift, that is that mental flexibility, being able to transition from one situation to another easily. Some of you may see this with your child when they may be very into a video game and you ask them to shift or transition to something else. And then you have that emotional meltdown where the transition is very difficult. Or maybe you get off your regular, consistent schedule, and that shift, that transition becomes difficult. Emotion control. Many of you brought this up earlier. So, emotion control, if you have difficulty with that emotion regulation, you're often seeing yourself or your child or your clients have a big emotional response to something that you viewed as very small. So we look at emotional control. Initiate and task completion, those go hand in hand, don't they? So that ability to avoid procrastination, start that task right away, stay on that one task until completion, closed-end tasking. We also address or evaluate working memory. So if you look at working memory, it's important to understand the difference between short-term memory and working memory. So short-term memory is information that you hold for about 15 to 30 seconds, and then you use it in the same manner. So if I met you at a conference and I said, hello, my name is Gwen, and then you look at me and you say, hi, Gwen. So you took that information in, you stored it in short-term memory, and then you used that information. You remembered my name, you said my name. Working memory is a little bit different in that it's kind of like your mental sticky note. It's where you take in information, you hold that information on your mental sticky note in order to complete a task. Much like a recipe, if the recipe calls for 2 sticks of butter and a cup of sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla, and you hold that information in your mental sticky note in order to follow through with the task without forgetting where you are or forgetting that information. Planning and organizing, of course, is often a difficult area. I think a couple of our individuals brought up planning as a difficult area. And then task monitoring, that's where you actually take the time to review your task, your assignment, your work, and make certain that you haven't made any careless errors. And then, of course, organization of materials. So you see that the brief assessment, again, an online survey that gives you the ability to evaluate all of those mental processes that are part of executive function. Now, some of you are asking questions about the PowerPoint. Yes, I will share those with you. And also, this is being recorded. So you will receive the recording, Quinn, actually tomorrow. It takes about 24 hours to get it edited and out to you. Okay. So this is really helpful information. And I wanted to share just a sample of the questions. So you see, these are the questions. I have trouble concentrating on tasks. I have trouble with jobs or tasks that have more than one step. So it's a series of questions, and you're going to respond often, sometimes, never, always, whatever you find to be the true response. So it is a subjective assessment, right? It's based on observation, experience, and feelings towards that. So then we can take all of that information and look at the results. Now, I condensed the results. The report is absolutely much longer than this, but I just looked at student A, who we're going to chat about now, and look at what the brief showed us. So for student A, the brief reported that there were areas of concern in inhibit, shift, emotional control, working memory, and planning and organizing. Okay. Otherwise, student A's abilities were appropriate for his age in the following areas: self-monitoring, initiate, task monitoring, and organization of materials. So already we've broken down the areas of difficulty and also the strengths. What is good? And we can build upon those strengths. Now we're going to take this information and we're going to take that path that's to the right, that path that incorporates both accommodations and skill building. So when we look at one area of concern was working memory for student A. We found that working memory was a difficult process when we assess executive function. So one of the accommodations we'll make for student A is that when we present new information, we will give student A additional time to process that information or time to rehearse that new information. Because we know if student A is struggling with working memory, it takes a bit longer for that individual to take in that information, hold that information on that mental sticky note, manipulate that information and apply it, right? So you're taking information in, you're holding that information, assimilating it with prior knowledge. And for student A, we know this is a weakness. So we know it's going to take that student longer. So we make this accommodation and make certain we're giving that student ample time to rehearse. Now, in addition to that accommodation, we're also going to look at skill building within play attention. So you notice here, right off of my shoulder here, I have put a star next to working memory. That's actually one of our modules within the play attention program. So we're going to make certain that we have an accommodation in place. But while we put this accommodation in place, we are actually developing working memory. Now, remember, all of these cognitive exercises within play attention are brain enabled. Some of you may be very familiar with play attention. Some of you may be just looking at it for the first time. So let me make certain that you all understand that while you're doing play attention, you're going to be wearing that body wave armband. On the back of the armband, there are 3 sensors, and those sensors monitor your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer where you're allowed to work on all of these cognitive skill areas, but you have to activate each cognitive skill area with your attentive state. If you are not paying attention, the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to continue. So that's important to student A. When student A is working on working memory, he has to maintain his attention. And the reason we do this is because we know the very first catalyst necessary for brain change is attention. You can have a great teacher or a great counselor, but if you are unable to pay attention to that teacher or that process, it's going to be very difficult for you to get maximum benefit. So that's why we make certain no matter what skill you're working on within play attention, you are actively engaged. So again, that assessment allowed us to start making a plan of action. We're going to set some accommodations in place, but then we're going to get to the root cause, and we're actually going to help student A develop his working memory through play attention. So that was the brief, the behavior rating inventory of executive function. Now let's look at focus. The focus assessment is a norm reference test of attentional control. It is objective. So we have a subjective assessment and we have an objective assessment. This is not based on experience or observation. This is data that is computer driven. So it is computer based. And again, it is appropriate for the ages of 5 all the way up through adulthood. It does take 20 minutes. Now there is a 2-minute practice test, and then there is a 20-minute assessment. And it measures an individual's capacity to choose what to pay attention to and what to ignore. So we're looking at attentional control. And it is a very mundane task. So I am going to warn you up front that it is 20 minutes, but it will seem like a very long 20 minutes because it is very low stimuli. And the reason we do this is because we know if we give you a very high stimuli task or a task that is of high interest, you can probably hyper focus in those situations, right? So we don't want to see how well you do when you're really interested. We want to see how you perform on the day-to-day, on the more mundane tasks, because that's typically where the difficulties arise, right? Your child can come home and play with his Legos, or maybe do a video game or watch a YouTube video with no problem. But when it comes to much lower stimuli, like the reading process or homework, that's where the difficulty sets in. And that's not just for children, that's for adults as well. So it is a very mundane task. You have to respond to certain stimuli. So I get the question a lot, does my child have to read? There is no reading involved. So it's a CPT, which is a continuous performance test. And there's two different types of stimuli. One is a solid star and one is a star outline. Whenever you see the solid star, you have to push the space bar one time and as soon as you see it. If it's a star outline, you don't respond. And then there are distractors throughout. Now, at the end of that 20 minutes, we get a full report that looks at 4 areas of attentional control. And those include consistency. So that is the quality of your response. So if you're lower than the norm in the area of consistency, that typically means that you have a hard time starting and completing in a timely manner. So that's the homework that should take 15 minutes, but takes 2 or 3 hours. Or it may be that you're inconsistent in, let's say, your performance or your knowledge base. So you may notice that your daughter knows all of her times tables beautifully one day, and then the next day it looks like she's never seen them before. So there's that inconsistency. Performance, we're looking at the speed and also the accuracy of your response. And so if you're lower than the norm in the area of performance, this typically means you're a slower processor. So if you're an adult or a professional here, and maybe you notice that sometimes you or your clients, you understand the information. It just takes you a little bit longer to process the information or give a response. Or maybe you notice that when you're reading, you have to reread the information over and over until you can accurately summarize what you just read. Performance is also attributed to the ability to follow through with multiple step instructions. So if you say, go to your room, put away your sneakers, bring down your jacket, can your child follow through with that? Are you constantly redirecting her or reminding her? So that gives us a really good view of performance. And this was a really interesting review I did with a parent just a few days ago. And she has a 12-year-old daughter. And when we looked at performance, she was very low in the area of performance. And I said to the mom, I said, I bet when you give your daughter multiple step instructions, like what I said earlier to you, go to your room, put away your sneakers, bring down your jacket. She has a hard time following through with that, right? You are constantly redirecting her or reminding her. And she said, oh, all the time. It drives me crazy. And I said, well, we're seeing that in the area of performance. This is a really difficult area for her because she's much lower than the norm. So it means that she's struggling with that ability to take in that information, process the information, and then follow through. And the mom said, oh, I thought she was just being obstinate. I thought she was just being defiant and didn't want to listen to me. So I've just been yelling at her, telling her to listen. And that is so common. And we all make that assessment sometimes on our own. And it is very difficult because we expect them to be able to take in multiple step instructions and then follow through. But sometimes they genuinely have not developed that skill. And we see it in school a lot as well. The teachers will say, oh, he just won't listen to instructions. He won't follow through with the instructions I tell him. And oftentimes when we do the focus assessment, we can see why, because this is a genuine area of difficulty and it needs to be addressed. You can compare it to a reading disability. If your child was assessed and diagnosed with a reading disability, you wouldn't sit your child down and then ask your child to read a novel and summarize it. right? You would put a plan in place so that you can help your child or your student develop the skills required to read the novel and then summarize. So you put the plan in place to reach the final destination, but we do that skill building. It's the same with process or performance and processing speed. We want to put a plan in place to develop the skills so that when you say, go to your room, put away your sneakers, bring down your jacket, he or she actually has the skill, the ability to take in that information and follow through. Impulse control, of course, that's the ability to stop, think, and then act. Or, impulse control can also be just rushing through your work just to get it done, but then you make careless errors because you rush through. So we look at impulse control. Impulse control also for a lot of adult clients may be that, blurting out, that you find you are constantly interrupting people when they talk. It's not that you want to be rude or you are not paying attention or you're not interested in what that individual has to say, but you're just struggling with that ability to control your impulsivity. And we can assess that. Also, distractibility. We look at both auditory and visual distractions. So we can see, are you more distracted when it comes to auditory stimuli or visual stimuli? Or are you about equal? And how can we address those areas? So we have the brief assessment that gives us a great overview of the executive function. Focus looks at all of those different areas of attentional control. And I want to share with you one of our clients, and this was her pre-assessment. So remember, we use assessments not only to give ourselves a baseline, but then to also make a plan of action and see if that plan is working. So this is Cara, and at the time she took this assessment, she was 6 years old. If you look at the results here, the blue line is her individual report. The purple is the norm, with the light purple being the lower part of the norm where improvements can be made, and the dark part of the purple line being above or better than the norm. We want to push her above that dark purple line because as she ages, that line actually moves, the norm actually moves to the right. So we want to make certain we're always working towards the right. So when we look at consistency, we can show that she is in the lower part of the norm. So we want to make certain we put a plan in place to help her move from 24% to over that 51%. So when we look at her plan of action, and remember, we're going to put in accommodations, but also skill training. And you may ask, well, can't we just do accommodations? Isn't that just enough? And many of you who have children with 504s in place may know that accommodations are not enough. We need to do skill building because although accommodations are great, strategies, tips, they're all great. We have to get to the root cause. We have to help you develop the skills that you need in order to be independent of those accommodations. Because I can teach you how to create a beautiful to-do list. And I was talking to one of our adult clients the other day, and she said, well, I can create a great to-do list, but the problem is I forget that I have the to-do list. I forget to mark things off, or I will start number 1 and impulsively I'll jump down to number 5, or I'll start number 1 and I'll get distracted by something completely different. So we want her to have that ability to create a to-do list in her toolbox, but we then have to do skill building because I have to make certain that I develop those skills with her in the area of attention, sustaining her attention. I have to work on the ability of her memory so that she remembers she has that to-do list, so that she remembers to check things off. Her impulse control needs to be addressed so that she can start number one and stay on number one until she completes it. So that's also task completion we need to work on. And we also have to work on her ability to filter distractions so that she doesn't get sidetracked when she starts one of those items. So accommodations, strategies, they're all good, but we have to get to the root cause and develop those skills so that the accommodation is effective, so that the strategy is effective. So with Cara, what we're going to do, since we know the area of consistency is difficult, which means she has a hard time starting and completing in a timely manner. She has a hard time sustaining her attention long enough in order to complete an assignment. So with her, we're going to give her frequent short breaks during completion of tasks. So we may break up the assignment so she needs to be one or, and each little increment where we take a break should be about 1 to 2 minutes in length. So we have that accommodation in place. But as we have that accommodation in place, we also want to do skill building so that eventually she doesn't need those mini breaks. She's able to direct and sustain her attention for longer periods of time. So in her play attention plan, we're going to incorporate attention stamina. That's going to teach her the ability to direct and sustain her attention at will. We're going to work on time on task, which is her ability to start a task right away, stay on just that one task until completion, closed-end tasking. And then we're also going to incorporate the academic bridge. And the academic bridge is where we're asking her to take all of the skills she's learned within play attention and apply them to her real work. So she might do reading, spelling, math. You as an adult might be doing your reporting. You might be replying to your email, whatever you find it difficult to pay attention to and sustain your attention to in order to complete it. But remember, you're going to be wearing that body wave armband. So we're going to be monitoring your attention while doing that specific task. So again, it's where you take all of the skills you've learned and apply it. So we have accommodations and then we have skill building. And this may be her plan of action. It's a little incomplete because of course there are a lot of other areas we can address. And we only talked about working memory and consistency. But again, the assessment helps us put that very specific plan in place. Now that we have the plan in place, we're going to use the assessments to determine if we reached our goal. Did we reach our final destination? We went down that path. Did we reach our goals? Is it time to graduate? And the assessment at the end, and as I mentioned, if you're looking at play attention, we'll probably do a mid-assessment, which is 20 hours in, and then about 40 hours when individuals on average are about ready to graduate. We have to make certain before we graduate the plan that everything's transferred and generalized, that we are doing well at home or in the workplace or in the classroom. So the assessments at the end will allow us to determine that. And when we look at Cara, remember in the beginning, her consistency was in the lower part of the norm. She was at 24%. And our goal through play attention training and those accommodations was to get her to 51% or higher. And you see here at her end assessment, her post-evaluation, she was well above the norm at 88%. So what does this look like in the day-to-day? Remember, this means that she's able to start and complete in a timely manner. This means that 15 minutes of homework is taking 15 minutes or not 2 to 3 hours. This also means that when we teach her a skill set, like her multiplication tables, she can remember those multiplication tables on a day-to-day basis. She's consistent in her performance. I wanted to share this with you, her impulsivity. Now, impulsivity, when we looked at consistency, let me just go back to that. Consistency is considered to be a positive construct, right? If you're consistent, it positively affects your attention, your performance, your executive function. So consistency, the higher the number, the better, because it's a positive construct. But if we look at impulsivity, this is considered to be a negative construct. So actually, we want that number to be lower. The lower the number, the better. And you can see on her pre-assessment, Cara was 88% impulsive. That means that 88% of that 20-minute time, she was responding impulsively. But at the end evaluation, where we're looking at whether or not we should graduate her from the program, our goal was to get her to that 14% or lower. She actually performed at 1%. She was impulsive 1% of the time. So huge gains. And we often see impulsivity specifically make huge gains, even at that mid-assessment. And we incorporate impulse control in all of our exercises. So as you graduate from the beginner to the intermediate and advanced skill options in all of those areas we discussed, we tie in a lot of other skill sets. So you may be working on time on task, but when you move up to time on task, that ability to start and complete in a timely manner, and you're at the intermediate level, we tie in impulse control. So in every single play attention session, we're tracking and monitoring and developing impulse control. We also work on processing speed and task switching, and also your ability to deal with distractors. So this is really exciting, where not only did we put this plan in place, but we can see how much she improved over time. So I hope this overview gave you maybe a new way to look at assessments and really understand the value that assessments can have. So not only do you want to have an assessment, but you want to use that information to devise a plan of action. Remember, assessments describe the problem areas, show us your strengths and weaknesses, can indicate the severity of those weaknesses, allows us to develop a plan of action that may include accommodations, but also that critical skill building. And it provides a baseline so that we can document progress over time. So let's talk about how we can help you find your path. So if you're interested in doing an assessment, and we've talked a lot about the brief and the focus, so maybe you have done an assessment that's similar to the brief, or maybe you did a brief assessment in the past. But you could do the brief assessment, you could do the focus assessment, you could do both, because remember, the brief assessment is more subjective and the focus assessment is objective. So it's nice to have that balance. The assessments are appropriate for any age from about 5 years old all the way up through adulthood. Now, the assessments, when you do them with us, they are typically $50 a piece. But with your webinar special, you'll have buy one, get the second one half price. And if we do an assessment with you, we do need to plan on about a 40-minute block of time for the follow-up. So that's included. So we'll do the assessment and you can do it on your own time. We'll send you the instructions electronically. You do the assessments. Each one, like I said, takes about 20 minutes. And then at the end, we need to have that 40-minute block of time to review the assessment results with you and talk about those different areas, talk about the level of severity in each of those areas, and then discuss a plan of attack, a plan that will help you reach your goals. So if you're interested in finding out more about the assessments, or if you would like to go ahead and register for the assessments, just type assessment in the chat box and we'll make certain that we follow up with you so that we can talk about the assessments and get you registered. Annie says, is the actual plan, program, etc., online or in person? Annie, we have two different versions of Play Attention available. One is the Play Attention home version for adults and children who want to use the program at home under our professional guidance. And the other is the professional. So if you're a professional working with a variety of clients, you can set Play Attention up in your professional setting. So you will set the program up in your home or at your office, but all of you are assigned a personal executive function coach. That's one of our coaches here on staff to assist you every step of the way. So even Annie, if you're planning to do the program at home for yourself, you will be assigned a personal executive function coach, one of our coaches here on staff to assist you. They will not only do this initial evaluation with you where we can make that plan and set up your profile, but we will also then take you through a practice session to make sure you're really comfortable with everything before you start working on your sessions officially. And then from that point, you can call or email whenever you have questions. You can send your data in for an evaluation. We'll do a Zoom meeting with you to talk about progress and help you set objectives. So that is a really critical part. And when you do the assessment with us and we do the follow-up discussion to discuss the results and a possible plan that may work for you, that gives you the opportunity to assess if Play Attention is the right fit for you, your child, or your clients. And when we look at those different areas of executive function and attentional control, there are a variety of cognitive areas that can be put into your Play Attention plan. The Play Attention program comes standard with 6 courses, which are considered to be the modules, the foundations of executive function. Those include attention stamina, visual tracking. So attention stamina is your ability to direct and sustain your attention. Visual tracking is a great one. If the teacher ever says, he does great when I stand right next to him, but as soon as I walk away, he's out the window and out the door and he has that diffused attention. So we work on staying focused and visually tracking. Task completion, so that you're able to start and complete tasks in a timely manner. So at the end of the day, you're not completely exhausted, that you're able to start and complete in a timely manner. Short-term memory, of course, we talked about earlier, your ability to filter distractions, and then the academic bridge, which is where you'll actually do real work activities while connected. And as I mentioned earlier, the intermediate and advanced skill options also tie in processing speed, task switching, impulse control, distractors. And then we have a variety of modules from our masterclass that you can choose from and incorporate at any time. Working memory, auditory processing, that's the ability to follow through with those multiple step instructions, hand-eye coordination, social skills, picking up on social cues, motor skills, spatial memory, remembering where things are located, and mindfulness. Now, our end goal is to help you develop these cognitive skills so that you will have strong executive function. And although you don't see organization or emotion regulation, and we know that those are processes of executive function, these are all the foundational skills you need in order to improve executive function. Because if you think of, let's just say, emotion regulation, in order for you to be able to control your emotions, you have to be able to pay attention to the entire situation. You have to be able to process that information. You have to have strong memory so that you can draw on prior experiences in order to determine a response. You also have to control your impulsive nature to just respond with the first thing that pops into your head. And all of those skills are what you're working on in every single Play Attention session. So every time you do a Play Attention session, you're strengthening executive function. So again, there are a few steps that we can take and help you figure out your journey and help you along that journey. One, of course, is if you want to register for an assessment, one or both, or if you just have more questions, type in assessment and we'll follow up with you to discuss your options for the assessment. If you want to do, maybe you don't want to do an assessment, but you just want to schedule a one-on-one consultation, where we can discuss your particular needs and you can ask questions with one of our specialists, then you can just type in consultation. Remember, if you do an assessment, the consultation is part of that follow-up. So you can do the assessment with a consultation, or you can simply do the consultation. Also, our next webinar is on December 13th. And that webinar is going to be fantastic. It is with the founder of Play Attention, Peter Freer, and he's going to be chatting about advancements in neurotechnology. Can neurotechnology make you smarter? So that is a really exciting webinar. He's always a great presenter. So if you want to register for that next webinar, just type in webinar and we'll make certain you get registered for that. You can always go to our website as well. We always have the webinar schedule posted there. So again, assessment, consultation, webinar, all of the above, whatever you'd like to type in, please do type in those next steps and we'll make certain to follow up with you. If you have any additional questions, please do type your questions in and we'll address them. If I don't have time right now, I will make certain that we follow up with your questions as well. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your time today. I do hope that this webinar gave you a new perspective, perhaps, on assessments and why they're important and what we can really do with that information. Because when you do have knowledge, it is powerful. You can make a plan and you can make a change. So I do hope that this was informative for you. And I do look forward to seeing you at a future assessment or consultation or one of our upcoming webinars. Thank you so much, everyone. And I appreciate your time and attention. Take care.